This is a cumulus cloud. You may have seen one. Fluffy, white, great at picnics. They're a very common sight. A cumulus cloud is what the average person thinks of when they think of a cloud. Well, maybe not. You see, clouds are broken up into families, depending on their shape, formation, and altitude. Cirrus clouds, for example, are wispy in shape and form at the top of the troposphere, and as a result are composed of small ice particles rather than cloud droplets. The thing is, though, much like with animal taxonomy, clouds are further broken down into species. When you envision a cumulus cloud, you are most likely thinking of cumulus humilis, or perhaps the slightly larger mediocris. These are the typical, friendly, cotton-esque clouds that dot the sky on fair weather days, and are usually around 1 kilometer across. They can, of course, get bigger. A step up from mediocris is cumulus congestus, or a cumulus tower. Cumulus towers indicate strong atmospheric convection, and if sustained, may grow into a cumulonimbus. Although not a requirement, as in the case of cumulonimbus castellanus, cumulonimbus clouds are distinguished by their iconic anvil shape. The titanic updrafts within the storm push clouds to heights of 15 kilometers or more, with anvils spreading out along the tropopause many times that. Despite being fueled by hundreds of billions of joules of convective thermal energy, though, the turbulent air between the troposphere and stratosphere prevents the cloud from rising any higher. Some of the most powerful thunderstorms may break through a tad, visualized as an overshooting top, but only barely. To pierce into the stratosphere, you're going to need a lot more energy than even that. Arguably, no greater symbol of the apocalypse is that of the nuclear mushroom cloud. Tall, fiery, billowing, fungi-shaped masses of cloud pulverized city. They're everywhere. Movies, video games, quote-unquote epic VFX wallpapers. They are synonymous with destruction. So if you think about it long enough, the question may arise. Why a mushroom? Why not a block? And what are these rings? And what are these things? And why is the Nagasaki cloud clearly in 2 parts? And why is this guy doing that? And for the love, what is up with the donut? Yeah, the donut. Well, clearly I have some explaining to do. So I suppose it's time for a little Mushroom clouds are typically composed of 2 parts. The head, the round thing, and the stem, the long thing. Upon the detonation of a nuclear or large conventional explosive, a fireball of superheated matter quickly expands out from the epicenter. In the case of nuclear explosions, the epicenter of the blast can reach tens of millions of degrees, which is actually the vaporization point of just about everything. Within milliseconds, the fireball's expansion undergoes rapid deceleration as well as rapid cooling, leaving behind a massive dome-shaped cloud of dust, debris, and water vapor, which condenses as the air cools. Now, a fundamental principle of fluids is that warmer fluids have a tendency to rise above colder fluids in the process of convection. And since the mushroom head is still significantly warmer than the surrounding air, it begins to rise. Now, another fundamental principle of fluids is that if you lift a fluid, it enters a less dense environment. Thus, it expands, and per the ideal gas law, as the
pressure decreases,
its temperature decreases. What ends up happening is the air at the top of the head becomes colder than that of the bottom, which is subsequently pushed up and out of the way by the warmer rising air below it. This creates a large circular rotating current, a convection current, within the head of the mushroom. So if you ever wondered why mushroom heads seem to rotate in on themselves, well, there you go. Now, the rising air at the center of the mushroom head creates an updraft below. The large clouds of dust kicked up on the surface by the blast shockwave are pulled up and into the updraft, creating a narrow column of rising cloud. And there we have it, a mushroom cooked so well it'd give Gordon Ramsay cancer.
This is wrong!
In some cases, with lower yield weapons that are airdropped, the mushroom head forms high enough to where the rising stem doesn't quite connect, as in the case of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The environment in which the bomb is detonated also heavily influences the cloud's appearance. Often a rising cloud will enter areas of high wind shear, causing the cloud's stem to contort and sidewind, such as in the case of the British Totem 1 test. In regions of high humidity, the cooling of the stem and mushroom head may not only lead to condensation, but the exceptionally high water content of the cloud may begin to precipitate rain. This precipitation takes the form of large, bulging structures or striations called bells or skirts. Many of the British and American tests conducted in the Pacific display these features, whereas they are absent on tests conducted at the Nevada test site. On the topic of condensation,
The ring!
Tell me, what do you envision when you hear the word shockwave? Some of you may picture a circular area of dust expanding rapidly outward. Some of you may envision a ring of pressure-induced distortion. A lot of you, however, are probably thinking of something like this, or maybe this. A visible ring of expanding stuff. Shockwaves visualized in this manner stem from condensation rings, a real phenomena resulting from the sudden and drastic pressure increases and decreases of a shockwave. Immediately forward of the shockwave, the air begins a rapid increase in pressure, and thus density. The hypercompressed air can no longer hold its water vapor content, which subsequently condenses. Behind the shockwave, the heat-driven updraft begins pulling air inward, away from the shockwave, reducing pressure. The condensation sheet evaporates once more, resulting in a ring. Rings form at select layers where dew points are close to atmospheric temperature, giving them their relatively thin appearance. In more extreme cases, where humidity is high universally around the explosion, the shockwave may form a sort of dome called a Wilson cloud. Arguably the most famous Wilson cloud was the result of Shot Baker of Operation Crossroads in 1946. The underwater detonation ejected massive amounts of spray into the air, coupled with the high humidity of the South Pacific, and the initial Wilson cloud completely enveloped the explosion, before subsiding, revealing the mushroom cloud behind it. Gotcha! Get ready to have your world turned upside down, because this is not a mushroom cloud.
What the actual fuck did you just say to me right now?
Alright, stay with me here. Remember that a mushroom cloud is comprised of two main parts, the head and the stem. The formation and growth of both of these is driven by a central updraft that continuously pushes the mushroom higher. In the case of the Baker cloud, this updraft is absent, and what appears to be a stem is actually a massive column of falling water, more akin to that of a bell than a stem. Without the convective updraft, the rise is stunted and stabilized at around 2,500 meters before collapsing back down. While relatively small, a cloud this size is no slouch, being 3 times the height of the Burj Khalifa, or roughly the same height as the prominence of Mount Adams in Washington. From here, though, nuclear clouds only become bigger, as atmospheric detonations yield true mushroom clouds. So, why don't we blow some things up? In July of 1945, the Manhattan Project culminated in the detonation of the world's first atomic bomb. The explosion stemmed from a Y-1561 physics package, named Gadget, suspended from a 100-foot shot tower. With a yield equivalent of over 20 kilotons, the Y-1561 was in essence a plutonium sphere surrounded by conventional explosives that, when detonated, compressed the sphere into supercriticality. Development of the implosion-type bomb began after the realization that the use of plutonium as a fuel in a gun-type weapon may cause a fizzle, or pre-detonation that would merely blow the physics package apart. Research into implosion designs was handed to Seth Nedemeyer by Robert Oppenheimer, in a conversation that I assume went something like this.
Throw me a challenge, make it unsolvable. I'll have it worked out and settled and sorted out by the morning.
After the fizzle postulation was proven correct, full attention of the Manhattan Project turned to implosion research, the Trinity test being its peak. The explosion of Gadget created a cloud 36,000 feet tall, unimpededly breaking through into a warmer layer of air 17,000 feet up that most believed would stop the cloud's rise. At this height, the Trinity cloud rose over 2 kilometers above the height of Mount Everest's peak from sea level. The Y-1561 was the core of the Mark III atomic bomb, the same bomb used for the shots of Operation Crossroads, Baker and Able. Although the Mark III is more famously known for its nickname, Fat Man.
Fat boy!
Less than a month later, on August 9th, a mushroom cloud peaking at 7.2 kilometers would loom above the scorched city of Nagasaki, as the remains of buildings, bridges, and piles of rubble burned beneath its shroud. 2 days prior, a similar fate was bestowed upon Hiroshima, as a 15-kiloton Mark I bomb, Little Boy, produced a cloud 6.5 kilometers tall. At heights like these, even the world's tallest mountains begin to shrink. Despite this, these clouds still have yet to top that of a cumulonimbus, let alone break through the barrier that seals the troposphere. Busting through a temperature inversion is one thing, but punching through the tropopause is a different beast altogether. It's clear, if we want a bigger cloud, we're going to need a bigger bomb. But just how much bigger can a bomb like this get? How far can a fission reaction be pushed before it caps out. In 1952, the answer would present itself. With members of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, military, and Los Alamos Laboratory in attendance, a B-36 strategic nuclear bomber would drop a single Mark 18 bomb over Eniwetok Atoll in the South Pacific. Nicknamed the Super Oralloy Bomb, the device was a heavily modified Mark 13 bomb, utilizing a system of 92 explosive points to crush a sphere of highly fissionable uranium-235, often referred to as oralloy, hence the name. Detonating 2,000 feet above Runa Island, the bomb yielded a TNT equivalent of 540 kilotons, more energy than even the most powerful supercell thunderstorms. The resulting updraft rocketed upward, punching through the tropopause at 55,000 feet, the mushroom head finally stabilizing at a staggering 22 kilometers, whilst a large bell rang from the base of the cloud. For a little perspective, let's drain the ocean. If detonated at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, not only would the cloud clear the trench, not only would it clear the surface, but the King Cloud would yet surpass Mount Everest, topping the peak by about a kilometer. Shot King remains the most powerful pure fission detonation in history, and the Mark 18 reigns as, fittingly, the king of fission weapons. You and I both know, however, that the quote-unquote fun doesn't end here. The largest bomb in the current U.S. arsenal, the B-83, has a yield of 1.2 megatons, so clearly bombs have gotten bigger. To achieve multi-megaton yields, a new kind of bomb was needed.
Now then, Dmitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with the bomb. The bomb, Dmitri. The hydrogen bomb.
Thermonuclear weapons, often called hydrogen weapons due to their nuclear fuel, utilize a combination of both nuclear fission and nuclear fusion to bolster explosive yield. The most common design for a hydrogen device, the Teller Ulam, makes use of a fission primary, a standard atomic bomb, to superheat and compress isotopes of hydrogen like deuterium and tritium to points at which fusion can be achieved. The fusing hydrogen releases further neutrons, amplifying the fission reaction. After 1952, fusion weapons became the dominant forces in the arsenals of the world, and over the next several years, one place became acquainted with thermonuclear testing better than any other. The March 1st detonation of Shot Bravo of Operation Castle would mark the largest nuclear test ever conducted by the United States by yield. The culprit behind the winds and fire was the TX-21 Shrimp, a cylindrical tube a few meters across. Partially protruding out in a cone on one end of the bomb sat a modified Mark VII atomic bomb called Cobra. This was the spark plug that triggered the fusion reactions of the secondary, a container of lithium deuteride. What nuclear physicists and engineers failed to predict were further nuclear reactions provided by the fissioning of lithium-7, which made up the majority of the lithium content of the secondary. The result was an explosion equivalent to 15 megatons of TNT, over twice what was expected. In less than a second, a fireball hundreds of thousands of degrees incinerated everything within a 2-mile radius. After a minute, the mushroom towered over the observation aircraft, flying at 40,000 feet. And after 10 minutes, a metal tube the size of a pickup truck had produced a cloud 39.5 kilometers tall. Although the mushroom head eventually splashed against the tropopause, the immense heat of the bomb carried the stem well into the stratosphere. The mushroom head itself reached an eventual diameter of over 66 miles, or about 106 kilometers. Wind shear aloft carried the head from the detonation point, contorting and bending the stem to the north, itself being wider than the Hiroshima cloud was tall. Naturally, being America's largest test, one would be right to assume it produced one of the largest clouds. But was it the largest? On October 29, 2018, the Parker Solar Probe made the closest approach in history by a man-made object to a star, passing roughly 8.5 million kilometers from the Sun. In the fall of 1952, mankind stood even closer. Operation Ivy, the nuclear test series that is, consisted of 2 detonations on Eniwetok Atoll in October and November of 1952. Ivy was the culmination of years of research and engineering of the potential viability of a thermonuclear reaction. Operation Greenhouse, conducted a little over a year prior, proved fusion boosting could significantly increase the yield of an atomic bomb. The next logical step was to build an entirely separate fusion stage. The product, TX-16, affectionately nicknamed the Sausage. To put it simply, to produce an effective thermonuclear reaction of deuterium required the construction of a 164,000-pound, 20-foot-long aluminum tube housing a Mark V atomic bomb on one end and a tank of liquid deuterium on the other, all hooked up to the visual equivalent of atomic life support. Now, if you weren't aware, at temperatures we're used to, hydrogen exists as a gas. Only after hydrogen is cooled to a temperature of negative 423 degrees Fahrenheit will it begin to condense into a liquid. Why does all this matter? In this video's case, it really doesn't. I just wanted to drive home the fact that the world's first thermonuclear weapon was a giant refrigerator. There was, of course, a chance that the Teller-Ulam device would fail, and thus a backup was devised in the event the TX-16 malfunctioned. The thing is, we're already well acquainted with this backup device. Given the 2 devices' predicted yields, the tests for both the TX-16 and Mark 18 were designated Shot Mike and Shot King, respectively. Hindsight makes the contest less dramatic, but the clash between fusion and fission for the future of nuclear weapons had begun. And just as the sun rose over the atoll on October 31st, the world would have its answer.
Welcome aboard the USS Estes. As you may or may not know, the Estes here is the command ship of Joint Task Force 132. We have minutes to go before the first blast, mic shot, of Operation Island. You have a grandstand seat here to one of the most momentous events in the history of science. In less than a minute, you will see the most powerful explosion ever witnessed by human eyes. The blast will come out of the horizon just about there. And this is the significance of the moment. This is the first full-scale test of a hydrogen device. If the reaction goes, we're in the thermonuclear era. For the sake of all of us, and for the sake of our country, I know that you join me in wishing this expedition well.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
10.4 megatons, officially the fourth largest device ever detonated by the US. 20 times more powerful than Ivy King. In an instant, an entire Second World War's worth of airdropped munitions turned Elugelab Island into plasma. From the 4-mile-wide hemisphere of hellfire rose a billowing white cloud, rapidly increasing in diameter. Within minutes, colossal skirts began to rain from the column as the mushroom head towered above the surrounding cumulus that hadn't been vaporized or blown away. 10 minutes after zero, the crew of the command ship USS Estes, the men who detonated the device from their distant vessel so many miles south of the atoll, looked up to see the flattening mushroom head extending out, thousands of feet above their heads. In those 10 minutes, the might cloud had grown to a diameter of 100 miles, the stem having punched upward to roughly 25 miles, or just over 40 kilometers, slightly taller than Bravo's cloud, and many miles wider. Mike remains the largest mushroom cloud ever produced in an American nuclear detonation, eclipsing even the colossal clouds of Castle. Of course, the United States isn't the only nuclear power. In the mid to late 1950s, with the nuclear test moratorium rapidly approaching, the United Kingdom scrambled to produce a functional hydrogen bomb to remain toe-to-toe with the United States and Soviet Union before atmospheric testing halted. Operation Grapple served as a test series of the various designs Britain had devised. The Orange Herald device, a 720 kiloton fusion-boosted weapon detonated during Grapple 2, remains the most powerful non-thermonuclear bomb ever built. Grapple X would hail a successful test of the nation's first true hydrogen bomb, the 1.8 megaton Round A, which itself was followed by a test of Britain's most powerful device built in 1958. On April 28th, a Vickers Valiant dropped the 3 megaton Dickens device off the island of Kiritimati. The high detonation altitude of over 7,000 feet stunted the formation of the mushroom stem. Within minutes, though, condensation skirts filled the gap and connected the growing mushroom head to the ground, giving the Grapple Y cloud its distinctive clean and layered appearance. The blast height did give the mushroom head an altitude advantage, allowing a 3 megaton blast to produce a cloud on par with the larger detonations of Operation Castle, Red Wing, and Hardtack. However, the pureness of the condensation, having been an airburst as opposed to a surface burst, likely aided in a faster dispersal of the cloud. The French, having done the complete opposite of the British by giving their tests badass names as opposed to the weapons being tested, yielded a similar height from the cloud produced by the 2.6 megaton Canopus test, their largest to date. With the joint American-Soviet nuclear test moratorium finally suspending atmospheric testing in November of 1958, the age of the giant mushroom cloud had finally come to an end. See, the thing is, although the United States had reluctantly agreed to halt testing, the Soviet Union wasn't about to go as quietly. In fact, they were about to go as far from quietly as humanly possible.
Against any form of aggression. We have also made clear our steadfast determination to limit the arms race. In 3 administrations, our soldiers and diplomats have worked together to this end, always supported by Great Britain. Prime Minister Macmillan joined with President Eisenhower in proposing a limited test ban in 1959, and again with me, 1961 and 1962. But the achievement of this goal is not a victory for one side. It is a victory for mankind. It reflects no concessions either to or by the Soviet Union. It reflects simply our common recognition of the need in further testing. This treaty is not the millennium. Will not resolve all conflicts, or cause the communists to forego their ambitions, or eliminate the dangers of war. It will not reduce our need for arms, or allies, or programs to others. But it is an important first step, a step towards peace, a step towards freedom, a step away from war.
Joe 111, the official Department of Defense moniker for the Soviet test of the AN-602 Ivan, a 3-stage Project 602 physics package encased in the ballistic shell of the defunct RDS-202 bomb. The product, a fully operational air-deliverable thermonuclear bomb with an explosive yield of 100 megatons, roughly 4 times as energetic as the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Close to half the bomb's predicted yield stemmed from a fissionable uranium tamper located within the tertiary stage. However, even with an airburst, the uranium tamper would leave untold amounts of radioactive fallout and render the test site unusable for some time. So, as not to lose their favored spot for high-yield detonations, and for the added safety of the delivery crew, the weapons engineers replaced the uranium tamper with an inert lead tamper of roughly equal mass. This reduced the bomb's yield from the purported 100 megatons to between 50 and 57 megatons, depending on whether you ask the Russians or the Americans. The largest nuclear explosion in history created a detectable shockwave that circled the globe 3 times over, and an initial fireball 5 miles in diameter. The burst height of over 13,000 feet was seemingly masked by a colossal stem composed of the remains of the Earth's crust that sat below the detonation point. Parcels of air thousands of degrees hotter than their surroundings reduced the venerable tropopause to nothing but a speed bump. Minutes after zero, the mushroom head overlooked the Tu-95 bomber that had delivered it as it rocketed through the stratosphere before splashing against the stratopause and flattening. The final diameter of the dispersing mushroom head reached in excess of 200 kilometers, an area larger than Belgium. At 64 kilometers in height, the cloud dwarfs all convective clouds, both natural and artificial, and had broken into the mesosphere, a realm previously known only to naturally forming nocticulent clouds. Even at half its yield, the AN-602 remains humanity's single greatest display of raw energy, and forever lives on by its colloquial nickname, Tsar Bomba. So that's it, yes? It's not like there is a bomb more powerful than the Tsar bomb. And that's not a trick question, because to the knowledge of most people, bar some shady figures in black suits, there genuinely isn't. So why hasn't the video ended? We know the lower atmosphere has several boundaries that stunt the growth of clouds attempting to rise. And with its immense convective heat source, the cloud of Joe 111 tore through them with efficiency that no smaller device could ever achieve. The thing is, it just so happens that an aluminum tube spitting fire does the job just a little better.
It's 30,000 megatons pointing at her, and him and you and me, and everyone we serve. Look out at the mirror, look out at the world. 30,000 megatons is just what we deserve. No, I don't get out of bed no more. Beasts learn to talk a bit just to survive, but we're not even beasts. It's a wonder we're alive. We're baser than the base, deaf and dumb and blind.
them a Happy Meal or something.